What is the best way to be able to communicate with your client?
Do you ever wish life had an undo button? Walking the balance between business and the creative life can be hard. But Matt and Shelby are here to attempt to answer the tough questions, so you don't need an undo. Presented by Made by Things. This is the CMD-Z Show.
Welcome back to the CMD-Z Show. We have an extra special episode today, but before we get to our special guest, Shelby, how you doing?
Pretty good. I sound slightly better, I think, hopefully from last week. No longer sick.
Yep.
So we're doing quite a bit better.
Shelby, you have been doing a lot of traveling and getting snowed in everywhere you go, it seems.
I know. I know. It has not been fun. Sioux City, Sioux Falls, throughout the whole tri-state area through there. We've gotten a couple feet of snow. It's not been a good time, but we're traveling. We're moving. It's okay. There's no ice, so we're not so bad.
Nice.
But.
Nice.
It's what keeps happening up here.
Nice.
It snows, then rains, then freezes over. And then it's just, that's a whole other ballgame.
Yeah. You're probably wondering, who is that voice? Well, that's why this episode is extra special, because we have a guest, Jeremy Thibodeau. Jeremy, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm recovered. I'm recovered from that onslaught.
What city are you in?
I'm in Montreal.
Montreal?
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, that's why when you guys were speaking about snow, it resonated with me.
Right. We're all very similar weather patterns. Shelby's you're in Iowa today, right?
I am in Iowa today.
So
yep.
Iowa, and I'm in Columbus, and then up a bit, you're up there, Montreal. This is good. This is turning into a geography episode of the CMD-Z Show.
We're Central East. We're in North America. We're all in North America here.
We are not in the West Coast or the East Coast, or we are not South.
Yeah, it's true. I actually, because I do have a few clients that are Central Time, and I can never remember if it's 1 hour or 2 hours difference. I've missed meetings because I thought it was at a certain time. Anyway, Yeah, it's confusing.
Yep. Yep, I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Don't worry, not just you. So we're having you on the show because I was scrolling through LinkedIn the other day, and I saw a video about a post that you wrote. It seemed like a couple days before. And,
yeah, you were a little late to the party. Actually, I was
apparently.
Yeah.
I was, but I saw your response first, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta know what is going on here."
My 10-minute rant.
Yeah, it was nice. It was good. Before we go into the question here, I want to read this post for just a moment. Again, this is Jeremy's post, not mine. Just want to be sure we're all on the same page here. So, this post got a bit of hate from it. Now, I've been there. I've written things where you mean well and people kind of take it a different direction altogether. And I think that's why this kind of resonated with me so much, because I was like, they're not understanding kind of the meaning behind this post as much. They're kind of responding to small things in this.
You said in your comment, people were looking for a reason to hate this before they even finished reading it. So I could tell that you've had experience with this kind of thing too. And we can speak more to that in a moment, but yeah.
Yep. All right. So you wrote, if you're a freelancer and it's our first time working together, the very worst thing you can do is have a slow response time. I'm trusting you next to blindly to deliver for a client with whom I've fostered a relationship for years. When you don't answer within 2 hours of me asking for an update, I get very anxious. Ideally, you'd answer within 10 minutes. Once we've worked together a few times, not so important, but when it's fresh, be extremely responsive. How your client feels about working with you is the most important component. Now, before we dive into this, the big question that I have for you is, what is the best way to be able to communicate with your client? So going back to your post, what was your initial response when you started seeing a lot of the comments that you were getting?
Well, okay. So first off, I made a commitment at the beginning of the year that I'm going to start to try to, invest in a LinkedIn presence. And I think that something a little bit unique that I bring to the table is being able to share the experience of working with large, corporate clients directly, but as a creative, so not through an agency. And so, the way that I've been able to kind of position myself is through having really good customer experience and really good communication. And so my whole spiel is basically just sharing insight into that. So and I don't like have a bunch of stuff planned out. I got a bunch of stuff in my head, and then I just I'm trying to post 4 to 5 times a week. That's what they say to do. So it's Saturday morning and I'm there, I was just sitting on the toilet and I'm just thinking, well, okay, what's one thing I could say that, people will benefit from? Well, personally, a really fast response time definitely is appreciated by my clients, and I certainly appreciate it. And so that was the first step in my head. So we'll just, we'll nudge people towards fast response times. The second thought in my head was, okay, well, I want to write it in a way that's going to hook people, because I'm trying to learn how this whole algorithm thing works. So I was like, the worst thing that you can do, right? Because then people are like, well, what's the worst thing you could do? And then it said, have a slow response time. And a lot of people, I think, were like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then they kept reading, and then they got to ideally you'd answer within 10 minutes. And I think that's the thing that set a lot of people off, because what it came across as was me, and my profile even said agency founder at that point. And I do have a small agency, but we can get into what actually constitutes an agency, because I realized afterwards that I think a lot of people kind of actually hate agencies and feel oppressed by agencies. So I'm taking that term away from how I self-identify, even though we are a small agency. But again, that's my definition of an agency. I don't know exactly how everyone defines an agency. But the whole point is, this came across as me, this agency exec guy telling freelancers that, if they don't answer within 10 minutes, they're not doing things properly. And I think that that's kind of how people took it. And we're just like, this is an insane, toxic expectation to impose upon the freelancer body. You're a toxic client. And so, it sparked, it didn't only spark, it sparked a ton of conversations in the threads, got up to 400 and something comments. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot about what that pain actually looks like and feels like, that kind of pain of oppression, or exploitation more, I think. I think a lot of people are and feel exploited, especially when you're out on your own and you're juggling so many things at once. And then it kind of spiraled. I also had a few, I think, kind of heavy hitter accounts. When I say heavy hitter, I mean accounts who have, followings and engagement from the freelancer body that kind of deliberately mischaracterized what it is that I wrote. And I think they do this as a recurring strategy in order to appeal to a certain segment of the LinkedIn audience by essentially rephrasing what people say, in the comment, and basically calling them out for being oppressive, buyers or predatory buyers. And that, obviously, connects with people because they have their own experience like that. And so then they actually come across the post through the creator that they're following who commented aggressively. Then they go back and read the post, but already with the context of the comment that led them to the post in the first place. And then they see that, 50 other people have chimed in. And so they feel empowered to chime in themselves, and it just snowballs. And that's kind of how that works. So, So that's what happened to me. And, then it comes down to, are you going to take it on the chin, or are you going to, get butthurt about it? And I'd like to think that I, at the very least, kind of, responded with some integrity, and hopefully the follow-up post was able to clarify. The follow-up post got, 5,000 impressions versus the original that got 100,000. So I think a lot of people didn't see the follow-up post. And so now my name and face is associated to this idea of like oppressive agency client.
Right.
But for the ones who did see the follow-up post, I think that my position was, at the very least kind of like reinforced. And I got a lot of people reaching out saying like, good on you for kind of taking it the way that you did. And, thanks for posting the clarification and so on and so forth. So all in all, I was happy with the experience. At first on the Saturday, I was like, whoa, no. And then Sunday again, like, so it kind of like ruined my weekend emotionally. Like my girlfriend was like, put it down and just let it go until Monday, take your weekend. But like all weekend, I was like, how much, like every like 2 minutes, I'm getting like mad hate. Like people are saying like, oh, this guy must be an abusive partner, to his spouse. Like people really took it. Like there were reposts about like, anyway, just, yeah. So, but then I realized, you know what? It's just LinkedIn. It's like, what is this? This is completely irrelevant in my actual life. And it's social media. That's how social media is. It's that way by design. So once that kind of clicked in my head, it actually started to become kind of fun. And then I ended up spurring on some fun conversations, and it even inspired me to bring up some other points over the course of the week. Because it was the first week of the year, didn't have much client work going on. The clients were kind of, figuring out their budgets for the year or whatever. So I had a lot of time. So I spent the whole week just like arguing with people on LinkedIn, and it was fun.
So, I think that's one of the big things that kind of drew me to wanting to get you on the show, is that like there's not many people that know that sort of feeling of you meaning well and posting something of like real stuff. Again, like, yeah, I'm right there with you. I've done it, I don't know, at least a few times now. And it's like each time it's that same feeling where you're like, no, you're taking it the wrong way. And it's like, and then you start to like, I don't know, you start blaming yourself for a little bit. You're like, oh, I should have wrote it a different way. And then you're like, wait, no, they're interpreting it wrong. And then it's like kind of one of these things where it's tough. But, I guess diving into a little bit more of the details of what you're saying here, the idea of having a slow response time, I think that was one of the things that probably scared people off, because slow is relative. I think a lot of it is sort of based on the expectations that an artist sort of sets early on in a relationship, right? So if they are somebody that generally communicates back within 10 minutes, like that's up to them, right? Like, yes, everybody would love to have that like quick 10-minute response time. That's what you're saying. But if you start working with people that do have these quick response times, and all of a sudden you go a couple hours and you're like, wait a minute, is something happening right now? Like, because
sets a bad precedent. I got a lot of pushback on that. Well, no, that sets a bad precedent. So again, that's why I said like at the onset of the relationship, I don't think that that's something that needs to, persist over time. But what I'm saying is like, again, I'm coming at this from the perspective of, I deal with kind of like big retail fashion brands in New York City. And I do internal comms. So internal comms and we're responding to the whims of all kinds of, executives that don't have a full understanding of what's entailed in production. It's fluid. It's very fluid. And that's how it has to be. And that's how they're able to excel. And that's how we're able to excel. So for me personally, especially like during the pandemic, like I'd have like 15 to 17 individual projects on the go with like, a wide variety of teams and specializations. And I had to scale up fast. And, I worked with people who I felt could do the job, and they ultimately were able to do it. But, like these were kind of like fresh client relationships for me. And, you know, like I said in the clarification rant, a black mark on your record stands out so much more than, you know, 100 white marks even. It's a stain, right? It's like a piece of clothing. Like you have one stain on it, like a piece of clothing's ruined. I don't care how nice the shirt is. So, you know, you fear that black mark, because once the black mark's there, the client just is always looking over their shoulder, and they don't like to feel that way. And so they, you know, they're more likely to transition over to somebody else if you let that happen. And so that's it. So, you know, when the client's there, like, what's ETA on this? And you know, I don't answer for like an hour. They're freaking out, right? Same thing, because their boss is like, what's ETA on this? I need this. What's ETA? And I'm just like, I don't have any damn clue what the ETA is, because I can't get a hold of the, you know, I can't get a hold of the compositor. And so that's where you start to get really stressed. And of course, like, there's a reason why I can't, because the person's working on the damn job, right? But it makes me very stressed. And at the end of the day, and this was a core of the debate, and I kind of like recapped all of this later on in the week, but there's like a fundamental you know, tug of war between pushing for things to be the way they should be versus adapting to the way things are. And so, you know, again, like, people were like, well, if someone was answering your message every 10 minutes, they wouldn't be able to get anything done. Very true. The way that it should be is that I don't need a fast response time. Ideally, I would trust you. And ideally, right? The reality is, I've never worked with you before. I see your portfolio. You come, you know, well recommended, but I have no prior experience with you. The stakes are very high for me. I have no visibility. This is all remote. And I'm freaking out. That's the reality. So one thing that you can do is be quick to respond, at least until I have that track record with you. And I'm speaking both from personal experience, more so past personal experience. Now I, you know, the volume's gone down, the deal flow's gone down, and I work with, you know, the same people over and over again, and this is not a problem. But there are certain times at the onset of a relationship where you can really stand out by like being like wicked fast in your responses. And the way that you can do that is deal with people through text. A lot of people were like, well, I don't answer emails very often, you know, like I can't be checking email. Dude, don't work with people through email. Like, work with people through text or Slack, like mobile. Like, we have phones now. I believe in this. I think that this gives you a leg up over everyone who's, you know, only checking their emails at the end of the day. I think that more and more this is kind of the direction that things are going. But the caveat is that you have to work with good people and good clients, right? You don't want to be, you know, burning yourself out for clients that don't appreciate the responsiveness and don't pay you well for that responsiveness, right? What you want are the clients that pay damn well. And one of the reasons that they keep paying you damn well is because you're so damn good to work with, because you're quite responsive. So if you can set yourself up to be responsive, I think it's an advantage. Then again, the pushback that I got was, we shouldn't have to push ourselves to be responsive. The industry should slow down to our lifestyle. And how dare you, right? You know what? There's a whole side to that argument that is not ridiculous. It makes perfect sense. Like, should we all try to limit stress and anxiety in the workplace? Should we, you know, really have just like the 9 to 5 and not be working after hours and not be working on the weekends? I think if everybody did that, we'd probably have a better world, a healthier world. We would have, you know, less competition though. There would be less pressure to outperform one another, because we'd all be restricted by the same kind of standards. And so, you know, progress might be stinted on a large scale, maybe. But is that worth it? Probably. It's probably better to have like a happier, peaceful world than a stressed out, like hyper productive world in principle. But is that the reality? So then it's like, maybe be responsive so that you can actually at least like have your career, instead of, you know, fighting the crusade by, you know, commenting on this guy's LinkedIn post. I don't know if you're going to change the reality. I think if anything, you're just kind of showing like all the good clients that you're not somebody who's willing to be responsive. if anything. So
yeah, there's so much in there that I want to respond to.
Yeah, sorry, I go on these 10-minute rants.
No, that's great. I think you're hitting the nail on the head, though. It's, for me, I'm always looking for an advantage of some kind, right? Whenever it comes to getting clients, and I'm competing against other people. We're all competing against,
and it's getting more competitive also. Right.
And I personally love competition. So I've never been offended by this idea of somebody working harder than me. I will 100% say I've never stayed up all night in my entire life and worked on something. So like, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that if you get to that point, something is broken. Mm-hmm. Either you need to fix it yourself or something. You can't blame other people. Even if you do something like that, it's more often than not, it probably means that you procrastinated on something and that's why you're working all night. Right. So I think that there is a healthy and unhealthy balance. Now, me personally, again, I generally work 9 hours a day. It's been that way for 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. But I'm also, in the middle of the day, if I feel like having a long lunch or getting coffee with my wife or something like that, like I do those things. Right. And I encourage everybody on my team to do the exact same. But at the end of the day, like it's trying to identify what are the advantages that you can have over other people. Can you simply say that, oh, I am a better artist than this person? You can't. In no world will you ever be like just better from a skill set than anyone else, because it's so subjective. Except for
there's just a couple people that are absolutely incredible. Like, right. There are a few people that it's just like, no, yeah. But that's like it's so small. And those people don't work directly with clients. Those people are like the prize jewel of Sidley and Ogilvy or whatever. Like they're really, really, and they've won the top awards and they're like, nah. But like, you're not that. You're probably not that. I don't think there's one person like that that's listening to us right now. They're busy. Like, they're very rare is my point. Right. And so, but that's me. Again, that's what I used to think I was amazing, better than everybody. When I was like, when I was like a teenager, I was like, well, I'm so good. But no, you're a lot of people do great work. Like we're all like, a lot of us are very good at what we do. But the point is like you're saying, that is not the thing that makes you the one that gets the opportunities. It is kind of like it's a prerequisite, really. Being good at your job. You're totally right. Yeah. Being good at your job is a prerequisite. That's not a differentiator.
It's really important for everyone to understand that this is a service-based industry that we are in. I think a lot of people want to productize it, and that's fine. You can probably maybe do that in some way or another. But I think it's really, really important to understand that, I mean, like you said, it's a prerequisite. You have to be good. You have to be good enough to work with certain people. But then at that point, that's not a good enough differentiator from everyone else that you're competing against. So it's like, all right, well, where are you going to go from there? So me personally, this morning, people won't like this at all, but
I will.
This morning, I got a project request. 3 minutes later, I was responding and saying, cool, let's set up a call for today or tomorrow. And 100% of the time, people are delighted that I was able to get back to them with that kind of speed. Now, not everybody is 3 minutes, right? Sometimes if it's the end of the day, I'm like, all right, usually if it's the end of the day, I'll send them a message. Hey, I'm gonna look into this tomorrow. Like, have a good night. But yeah, so this morning I do that, and then I get the same email that I get from almost every single person that calls us for a project. And that's like, wow, can't believe you're so fast on like responding to this. Like, thanks so much. Like, I understand that like you're likely reaching out, especially if it's somebody that we've never worked with before. You're likely reaching out because this is kind of an emergency situation for you. And they are feeling anxious already. We have won so many projects
by being the first one there,
by just being the first one there and just communicating really well.
Yeah. We preach that internally, hyper responsiveness, like hyper fast. Yeah. like as a means to differentiate super fast. And you're absolutely right. It's there's a lot of people that can do the job. A lot of times it's the first horse to get to the water, and they drink the water. And so one thing that you can do, and here's why I believe that this is one of the main reasons I believe that 2 to 3 person teams sharing a brand, as opposed to being an independent freelancer who's completely on your own. There are challenges that come along with being an independent freelancer who's completely on your own. If you can, because when you take vacation, you're on vacation. And if you're needed while you're on vacation and you're not there, you're giving room for somebody else to come in and, build a relationship with a client that you've had for, many years. Now you can plan your vacations around when you think your clients are going to need you, but it's not always super accurate. So I really believe the 2 to 3 person team that shares one brand, and that's where I was getting to the whole like agency component. Like this is a huge benefit. You can support one another. If someone's not available to respond, the other one can be, or just and you kind of. But now, if you get bigger than that, that becomes a whole other thing, and it unpacks a whole other pack of problems. But 3 is kind of the same amount of problems as 1. But you split the overhead, you split the back office, you split the brand, you support one another when you're not there, and it seems to be a good size of team to move forward with. But of course, you have to find the right synergies, people that you can work with, people that you can love, love working with. But this is the setup that I believe in. The 2 to 4 person teams, let's say, that unite under one brand. And then a bunch of those kind of working with one another, depending on the scopes of the projects. That's more the vision for the industry that I think makes sense given what's possible now.
I think that's a really interesting thing. I guess, going back to kind of what other people are probably seeing from this, that they're individual freelancers and they're like, wait a minute, like, how am I supposed to respond that quickly? Like, if I am doing the work as well. I can promise you that was one of the biggest points for me probably 4 or 5 years ago, where that's whenever I realized I can't do this myself. Because I'm trying to do this big project. At this point, there was just 2 of us on the team, me and one other person. And that was some of the hardest mental stuff that I've ever had to get through my entire life was, wait, I'm trying to respond quickly, trying to do all these different things. And yes, it will hurt you. But the solution isn't, the industry just needs to change. It's, okay, well, how... The game isn't going to change no matter what.
Probably not. Probably not.
But you can change the way you play it.
Yeah, that's it. Like if it does change, I don't think it's picketing. I think it's taking control. And so, I'll share a story. The clients that I currently work with, I work with, the agency has 4 clients. We have 4 clients, and our philosophy is find good clients and treat them very well and be their partner. So right now we have 4. We're 3 people in-house. 2 of those accounts are mine, and 2 of those accounts are another creative producer's. And then we have, somebody who knows the Adobe suite very well, basically, and can either, deliver or else be the safety net for when, third parties don't deliver. Or sorry, when third parties need support. Let's put it that way.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The vendors that my current accounts used to work with before, we came into the mix about 4 years ago, were big vendors. One of them was a Madison Avenue firm that, worked right next door. Another one was 170 employee studio with offices in New York, Santa Monica, and Dallas. These are big companies. And, within 3 to 6 months of working with us, these accounts, we displaced these vendors, and these accounts, work with us. directly, and we're 3 guys. And honestly, like 2 of these guys, like one of these guys doesn't even work with them. Like it's a guy with a laptop versus a huge thing. The reason this is possible. Like big companies have savvy marketing and comms people in-house. They have savvy decision makers in-house. And the cost associated to big agency is so prohibitive. I really believe that the shift is, an array of smaller partners working directly with comms and marketing teams that are, in the large orgs, and there being like a smarter way to connect and collaborate directly, and not have so much of the spend going towards, legal, retention, recruitment, marketing, sales, biz dev. It's like when you're working with these big firms, it's like 60% of your spend goes towards, the cost of the name brand of the agency that you're hiring, right? It's like you're paying so that the agency can sell to you, and then only about 40% of it goes towards the actual, design and implementation, project management, whatever. And I think people are growing more savvy to that. And I think these larger groups are, that idea of big agency is kind of, a little bit of a remnant from a time before we could connect direct and deal direct. And so I think there's that shift coming. And so the way to play that game is I don't think an independent freelancer can compete with big agency from a client experience perspective. Possibly, but you have to be very, very, very good and meticulous. A 3-person team, now you're starting to be able to provide the level of responsiveness and the level of, customer leadership that, a team of account managers that are purely dedicated to that, they'll do it for like 5 or 6 accounts. But if you do it for 1 or 2, whatever. The point is that I would recommend, if you have someone in your periphery that you think could be a good partner with, consider partnering with them. Consider consolidating under a small umbrella, not a big one. The goal is not, again, you can if you want. There's some 15, 20, 30 person studios that are doing phenomenally. And that's a whole other conversation. I'm not saying that doesn't have its place either. But one place where there's opportunity is these small, like 2 to 3 person teams. And setting yourself up so that you're really winning on customer experience. Because I think you can do well. And you can, like I said, I'm a guy in Montreal with a laptop. And, I displaced a 170 person, New York firm. It really is doable. So.
Right. I'm going to kick it over to you, Shelby. Are we being crazy here, thinking that people should be responding quickly?
No. As a producer, I need my artists to respond to me so I can respond to a client. But I also, it's the same thing. Part of the reason that I work at Made by Things is because I responded to an email quickly. Matt sent me an email.
She knows.
And I responded within an hour. And that was one of the reasons that I said, okay, let's set up a call for the same day. And now it's history. Now I've been here for nearly 2 years. It's about being responsive and attentive. And the thing is with me, it doesn't even need to be a big thing. If I'm contacting an artist and I say, hey, what's the ETA? Where is this? I need an update. And they say, hey, I'm grabbing a coffee right now. Give me 10 minutes and I'll send you an update once I'm back. That's fine. Just so I know what's happening. Just so I know and I'm updated. That's all that matters. And I know, Matt, you had responded. I read your comment back saying that you would rather work with somebody that might not be as experienced or as skilled, but is more, attentive and is more willing to communicate than somebody who's the best in the business, but doesn't communicate at all. And that's something when, especially, if I'm on set or if I'm working with an artist, I'm working with a freelancer, I need somebody who's willing to sit down, talk to me really quick, and then get back to work as somebody who's like, okay, well, I'm the best in the business, but I don't need to communicate because I'm the best in the business. Right. There needs to be some level of humility there of, okay, yeah, I can take the moment and respond and then go back to my work. Right. There is trust and there is humility. It's not, I'm just the best and I can dismiss everything else.
Right. And it's also, it's not like you need people to like just be constantly watching for your message to come through to respond. No. If they say, hey, you know what, I'm going to have something pretty good to look at, like at 3:00 on Tuesday.
Yep.
Great. As long as we have those expectations of like, great. Okay. So we should see something at 3:00 on Tuesday. But yeah, at 3:30, if we haven't seen anything, we're probably going to ask, and even then they might just be like, all right, another hour. Like I'll definitely have something good. Like it's really just about, it's about that communication.
Yeah, that's it. And you can also under promise, over deliver. So like very often if I receive an ETA for 2 p.m., I'll say that the ETA is, end of day. And right. So, yep. But yeah, that's it. It's again, to hit the point home, because I really don't want people to think that this is the case. Like you said, Matt, it's not about being like a notification junkie who's just like, constantly responding to the ding. That's not what it is. Some people, that is your job. I'm actually a little bit like that. To me, like my phone goes off, I respond to it. But this is really my angle. And, I do creative conception and edits and things like that. I do that myself, but most of it is creative direction, working with doers. Right. But, that's not the necessity. The necessity is, when you first start working with somebody, make a point of making sure that they feel good. Understand that their feelings are important, because they're going to base the decision to continue working with you off of whether they feel good. And the result you deliver is part of how they feel good, but it's only part of it. The experience of working with you is also part of how they feel. And so if you can be somebody who makes other people feel good, you're probably going to do better than somebody who doesn't consider that to be a priority. That's just the reality. So, responsiveness is fine. It's responsiveness is probably good towards that. But Matt, as you said, and Shelby too, just letting someone know you're there already is enough. So if someone's asking for an update, you can give them a meta update. Just say, I'll give you the update by this point. Again, right. Under promise, over deliver. Fine. So I'll give you the update by 2 p.m. Mm-hmm. That way it's like, okay, cool. So now I told the client, okay, well, 4 p.m. they'll get the update. Then it's 1 p.m. I got my update and I hit them up at 2 p.m. and like everybody's happy, right? And you told me right away. That's especially. Oh, the other thing too is during normal working hours. And then someone responded saying, well, as a freelancer, by definition, I don't have normal working hours. Right. Like you choose your own hours. You choose your own hours, right. But the world runs on 9 to 5 for a reason. And, right. People, the decision makers at these companies made the decision to go work at these companies because they value, being on the clock 9 to 5 and off the clock otherwise. And so if you're a freelancer that, requires them to be responsive at 7, 8 p.m., you're probably not positioning yourself very well in their eyes. Now, again, should the world revolve around your schedule, or should we, kind of wait for one another? Would that be a better world? In some ways, yes. It is really just not the case for clients that are valuable. The companies that have the money to pay for real creativity and to value creativity for real, they are bigger. They work in certain times. And so, of course, if it's 9 p.m., there's a different expectation around, communications at 9 p.m. than there is at 11 a.m. or 12 p.m. Right. So that's ridiculous. If it's ridiculous that to not like acknowledge that reality, to me is borderline insane. It's like, how could you deny that? Being responsive from 9 to 5 there's a different expectation in our world as opposed to being responsive from, at 11 p.m. So So that was the other thing too. I got comments being like, when I said, during normal work hours, and people were like, there's no such thing as normal work hours. It's like, well, it's like, we're not even, it's like I say 1 + 1 = fish. It's like, we're completely on a different wavelength here.
I guess that's the thing. It's like, okay, so yeah, being freelance, yes, you are in control of your hours. You can do whatever you want. But yeah, it's kind of selfish in a way to just think that you get to just work in this vacuum and that everyone else has to respond to you. I mean, you said it best. Like, that's why I don't love working with people outside of our time zone. And it's really just because of that, because when you contact me at 9:00 PM, I feel the need that I have to respond now.
Because you're the vendor.
And like, yeah, so it's just kind of weird. Like, I get it, but you're making me not have like these set hours that I have set. So it's like, well, I need you to have these set hours too, so that we're all sort of synced together here.
And the other thing also that I realized afterwards, it's like, I'm like, because I'm there, like, why, like, some of these people like seem to think that like the world should revolve around them. Then I'm like, you know what, like, I kind of feel the same way too. And us people who are out here doing our own thing, we're freelance, we have our own little studios, whatever. And also people that are in small companies too, right? Like, we like that. We like the fact that we're, in the bushes, in the trenches. We're not part of the larger assembly line. Part of the reason we like that, and part of the reason that appeals to us, is because we have pretty big egos. We don't want to be one of the bunch. We want to be our own individuals, right? And so, anything that kind of says like, get in line, I get a negative gut reaction to that. I'm like, I don't know. The whole point of doing this in the first place was so that I don't get in line. And now you're telling me like the best way to succeed at doing this thing is to get in line. Like, so that I did understand that too. It's like this, this group of people, we do pride ourselves on and value our own individuality, in the workplace, as agents in the workplace. So, I do understand the sentiment for sure. Like, I did this so that I could have more control over my life. And you're telling me that in order to succeed at doing this, I need to give up control and be at the beck and call. Like, how dare you?
Right.
And I get that. And that's an easy feeling to tap into if you're trying to, bait people, whether in a post or in a comment on a post. That's a very easy way to bait people, is by making people feel like their individuality or their individual liberty is being infringed upon. And I think there's a high correlation between the, artistic freelancer world and, being susceptible to this kind of thing, because we are people who really value that, being, having control over our own career. Right. So. That's
really interesting that you bring that up. Not something I was expecting to talk about, but I think that speaks to a lot of the bigger thing here. Like, everyone at this point wants to be freelance, it seems.
It's deep.
And I guess I've always wondered myself, was like, well, like, why? So for me personally, I've always been like, all right, I want to try to develop a workplace where everyone sort of feels like a freelancer in some way, but I'm trying to like blend these things, like, and it's not easy to do, because most people can't even describe it.
Yeah, it's future of work. It's a whole thing. Yeah.
Right.
And kind of like, how do you? Yeah. Sorry to cut you off.
No. But it's you run into these things where it's like I was one of the most angsty teenagers that you could probably find, and stick to the man. Yeah, whatever. Like, I get it. So like, everything that I've ever done has always been like, why? Like, no, I'm going to do it my way. Right. Like, I've always had this idea of like, let's do it. I want to do it my way. But I've always had to like figure out like, what is my way exactly? And like, that's one of the things too, where it's like, I remember like early on being like, oh, I get to like work whatever hours I want. But then I realized that it's actually doing a disservice to the people that I'm working with.
Yeah.
And that's not right.
Yeah.
But it's not just that. There's tons of things, like the whole like net 30 payments, right? Nobody loves the idea of waiting to get paid. And no, we don't either. But it's one of these things like, where is the compromise? It's not just like, okay, just give in to whatever they want. And it's also not, you're not going to get paid tomorrow, because bigger companies just don't work like that. So it's one of these things.
I did another post. Yeah, I did another post about that same week, where I actually posted our bank account. I just I just screen recorded the bank account, and I was like, look, we had $60,000 in the account on this day, and look, we have zero now. Zero. You know, this is
sorry, I'm not laughing at you.
No, but that's it. I'm like, this is, and we had a ton of accounts payable. But I was just like, dude, this is the cash reality of the situation. And again, freelancers should never have to wait for payment, period. Agencies should always pay their freelancers, sure. Period. And I'm like, yes, again, in principle. But now here's the question about what is an agency, right? Because remember, we're three guys. You're one guy, right? We're, and one of these guys is not even part of the picture, really. It's a separate part of the business. And so let's say we're two guys and you're one guy. And, what am I supposed to do? Do you want me to go to I'm pushing, man. But again, like, the accounting system is all screwed for this large client. They just went through the largest merger in the history of their sector. It's a 90,000 person company in 90,000 employees just in North America, over 200,000 worldwide, a big company. And they just merged. All of their accounting systems are all messed up, this and that. We've been waiting on payments for 6 months. And it's not like, wow. And I'm talking to all kinds of different people, and they're all like, I'm so sorry. I'm talking to people who are talking to people. And it's just like, there's this this is just what's happening. So I'm trying my best. We have $100,000 set aside. I put this too. We have $100,000 set aside. My money and money that I borrowed, that I'm paying interest on, in order to deal with cash flow issues, essentially making sure that you get your net 30 and I can deal with the net 60, right? We're two guys. You're one guy. You're one girl. So I have $100,000 set aside. What do you have set aside? Anything? No? So what, you're going to start charging me late fees? You think I'm going to keep working with you? You and I are working together to service this huge organization, both getting paid well for the work that we do. Now I'm in a bind. You're gonna lump all of that responsibility and financial burden onto me? If I was Ogilvy, fine. If I was Publicis, fine. I get it. They have access to huge debt facilities. It's, credit lines, whatever. For me, I'm just like you. I'm a guy. Like, there's no, like, in this situation, obviously, the people that I'm working with understand this. They see the intent to make sure that everyone gets paid on time. They're like, and you know what? They've also kind of set themselves up so that if there are some late payments, they're not screwed, right? They've in the same way that you invest in gear and facilities, you should also invest in a little net of cash in case things go to shit. Then you're not scraping around and starving. You have some money set aside so that you can be flexible and accommodating. Now, again, that becomes a bad thing if it becomes a pattern. The pattern should be, the individuals get paid when they're supposed to get paid. The agency, and that's why I say we are an agency. The agency takes the hit, right? Mm-hmm. But you cannot have the same, there's a balance, right? If you have the big agency, and even big agencies are late to pay, which is ridiculous. They spend on parties and all this, but they don't pay their freelancers on time. That's insane, right? But then you have the small 2-person agency, which is essentially just 2 freelancers that are put together, and they already have $100,000 set aside to deal with this. And that $100,000 gets busted. in that situation, I'm looking for partners that got my back, that will wait a month and can wait a month, as opposed to me having to take out money from a loan shark at, like emergency debt at like 30% interest to be able to like fulfill the obligations, right? So that's the kind of partner that I'm looking for. So again, what I'm saying is this world that I'm envisioning, where we have many small teams that are dealing directly with big organizations, this whole idea, you can't say like, oh, these agencies are oppressing me or exploiting me, but also at the same time, like the entirety of the financial burden of the pay structure is entirely on them. If you're going to give somebody that power, then don't expect them to treat you like an equal. Like they're the ones taking all of the burden, right? And so if they're taking all of the burden, then they're also going to take a big piece of the pie and you can't, and then they're going to try to squeeze you because that's the relationship that's been set up. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in big agency squeezing small freelancers. I believe in small teams collaborating equally, dealing directly with big companies. But that means that it's a little bit of give and take. It's like you take some of the financial, because again, the big companies pay slow. This was an outlier instance. Like this merger this has been fixed since then. But I'm saying every once in a while, shit's going to hit the fan. And if you've got good, solid, small teams that are interconnected, that can absorb the flows of the market, you can save 50% of the spend that's going into marketing and comms and content, 50% of that goes into keeping this big agency machine alive, can go into savings for the big co, as well as extra pay for the doers and the leaders, right? I think that's a world that makes more sense, but it means that we're all working together as collaborators, not in this kind of like chain, this rigid chain that's been set up. So anyway, that's my spiel about that.
No, I could go on for that one for a while, but
yeah, we could. I know.
I want to go into some final thoughts
here.
Just kind of like back to that initial question of
10 minutes.
Yeah. I guess going back to that. Let's do that. Ideally, you'd answer in 10 minutes. Short answer. People that have an issue with that, what do you say?
Keyword ideally. I use the word ideally because it's an ideal is an impossible thing to attain. What I meant by that, and I should have said 10 seconds, because what I meant by that is ideally you would answer instantaneously, as in like, ideally you would respond the same way a very good automated chatbot responds. You're directly there all the time. Ideally, I say the word ideally as in like, of course, we're never going to attain this ideal. But for the customer, the ideal experience is a perfectly tailored, perfect response. Every time they put their finger on the send button, there's a response right away. That's the ideal experience. That's the experience that, cannot be beaten from a responsiveness perspective. Of course, we can't do that. That's why it's ideally. Because you can't achieve that. That's why I use the word ideally. So that's why, again, you formulate if you pick certain words from the post and then you formulate a sentence, based on a selection of words, and then respond to that string of characters, you're initiating conversations in parallel to the point of the actual post, which is fine. But it's just now we have a bunch of different conversations going on in parallel. Honestly, which is fine. But just, read the language that is in front of you and process it, it and respond intelligently, is probably a good thing to do. But then again, maybe not. Maybe what makes more sense is to, say something that's kind of next to what was said. And now there's like, it wasn't a bad thing. All the negative comments weren't a bad thing. Like it sparked all kinds of great conversations. as opposed to if people had just responded to exactly what I said, like it would have been very localized and we wouldn't have gone on these tangents. Like I learned a ton that week. Not what I was expecting, but anyway, but ideally was the key word in that sentence, ideally, meaning not doable.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Shelby, final thoughts.
Yeah, I think we talk about the creative process a lot. And I think a big part of establishing your creative process and finding it is also establishing your communication and how that fits in within your process. And whether that be, I'm going to send an update every morning of this is where I'm at and this is how I'm feeling about things. And I think that's an important part of when you're, okay, well, obviously we're creating a process of this is how I'm working and this is my workflow, but where does communication fit into that? Where should you be checking in? Where should you potentially be having meetings? And I think that's important for everyone, whether it be a producer or a direct creative. That's something that they need to be able to discover as part of their process and make it, accessible to normal working hours with the rest of the world. So you are communicating properly with everyone else because it is a collaborative process.
For sure. I would say my final thoughts here are it's a two-way street, right? It's not just expecting people to respond quickly to me, right? Or like, any artist, contractor, anybody that's working with me, like, yes, I want quick communication, but I'm also going to give that quick communication as well. It's, things like when they send an invoice, we talked about this a little bit. Yes, I'm pretty sure most of our contractors get paid within a week. Like, yeah, we have a net 30 policy, but I'm like, you know what? Like, let's, set this expectation that we are going to be kind of here for each other and work hard for each other. And like, those are the relationships that I'm always trying to have. And that's how everybody is, like all the full-time staff that we have, like they are all 100% into that. They all understand the importance of communication, but they also all know, I like to think anyway, and Shelby, correct me if I'm wrong here. I like to think that if they reach out and they have a problem with their paycheck, okay, I'm dropping everything that I'm doing right now because that's one of the most important things all of a sudden. Like, I'm going to figure this out. Like, let me work this out. Because that's one of those things that, I don't know, we have to have each other's back, I guess. And it's that two-way street. So it's not just expecting people to always communicate within minutes or constantly be staring at Slack or their email. That's not it at all. Mm-hmm. It's really just, it's the relationship, right? It's communication is part of that relationship. Everybody wants to work with good people.
Absolutely. It's a micro case by case. It's a micro case by case. If the cash is there, it can be net 60 seconds. It can be, it's like you did the work right away. Like, and the idea is that everybody does their best. Everybody does their best. It's the same thing. It's like any relationship. If it starts to become a pattern of one-sidedness, things will fall apart. Think about like a romantic relationship, for example, right? Right. There needs to be reciprocity and communication about what the expectations are, but not only expectations, but also kind of like the values, right? It's more like core values and principles. So, that's it. Like everybody should just do their best all the time and, not be selfish and just try to support one another. Of course, the closer you are to the client, the more, the more of the financial burden you should bear. I think that makes sense. So if you're billing the client directly, it's also on you to make sure that, that spread in time is, I think that makes sense. That makes sense. That the 30 or the 2 days versus the, 70 days that it takes to actually get that's a real tangible issue.
Right.
And you should bear the burden of that. To a certain degree. That's the thing. It's like it's always a question of to a certain degree. And that was the takeaway, is that it's on every pairing of individuals to kind of like hash out, how you're feeling about how things are going and to touch base semi-regularly to make sure that you continue to feel good, and to be honest and vocal about if you're starting to feel like you're being taken advantage of. And that's the other thing too, is like, right, if you keep it in, you can't let and then you have to let the other person know, and just make it about your feelings. It should always be about your feelings, really. It should just, I'm feeling like, you guys are taking advantage of me. I really don't want you to feel that way. Okay. Or the opposite. I really feel valued by you guys. Like, you should communicate your feelings. And this is almost all about feelings. Like we said at the beginning, the work that you do is a prerequisite. How you are able to make people feel is 90% of the battle. And that, like Shelby said, all comes down to good communication.
Right. The last thing I'll say is, I think a lot of us have seen work from a company or individual, and maybe we're like, oh, that's not very good. Well, this sounds bad, but like you see this work, and maybe it's from a big company, and you're like, you see this work and you're like, I know I can do better. I feel like we've all said that at some point, whether out loud or internally. Because I know that I used to say that all the time. I'm like, why are they able to work with these cool companies and I'm not able to? And ultimately, that is the separator, is even though you personally don't think that work was that good, that client must have felt like they were being heard, being listened to, and there was a good relationship there. So there's a whole other part of this that you don't even know. Yeah. Like, yes, like everybody wants to do great work, right? But again, I feel like most clients feel the same way, most companies, where they would rather work with somebody that makes them feel good than somebody that just does A+++ work.
Yeah, makes them feel good, and then and is able to hit the target. Because there's a lot of great ways to do something. The one who's in charge of the brand's integrity, the one who's, that's what they're charged with. The internal marketing and comms people, and the execs, their number one priority is to make sure that the integrity of the brand or organization that they serve is maintained. And you're not putting stuff out there that's off brand, that's hurting the consistency of that brand voice. They're there to protect the brand. And so just because you think something's good doesn't mean it's on brand. And they're the ones who decide if something is on brand or not. That's their whole job. So it's about hitting the target more than doing good work. You have to hit the target. You have to define the target, because you also have to do something special. You can't just repeat the same stuff over and over again, because that's brand. Brand evolves. So you ideally are a thought leader on the forefront of the transformation of the brand. At the same time, you're not stepping out of the brand guidelines. And so it's complicated. And that's the thing that agencies do so well. The big agencies, that's what they do. They have all these, processes, secret sauce processes with, all kinds of great thinking and ways of communicating that go into, making sure that those parameters are met when you're delivering. That's a big, big, big function of agencies. But I also think that people like us are able to take that on and do it just as well.
Yeah. Jeremy, where can people find out more about you?
Just my personal LinkedIn profile is where, I'm all in on LinkedIn. Gonna do YouTube eventually one day. And then just last thing, the reason I'm starting to post more is because we're launching a platform, which it's called Compariscope.com, and it's designed to help producers, freelancers, and agencies, small agencies, with this exact issue of hitting your creative targets and communicating creativity efficiently and effectively, so that you can maintain good relationships with your clients, book better work more often, close on more opportunities, all by bolstering your communication, and doing that without having to spend hours and hours, instead just doing it in minutes. So it's called Compariscope.com. Going to start posting about that in March. Right now you can find it, but it's not quite ready yet. But mid-February it'll be ready, but March 1st is the official launch date. And that's the whole point of why I'm starting to post about tips on retaining the good clients, essentially.
Yeah. Love it. Jeremy, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Good conversation, good spirited talk.
Yeah, it was fun.
We might have to get you on, keep going with some of these topics.
It's a lot of fun.
So appreciate it, everyone else out there in Command Z land, as Shelby calls our listeners. Command Z land people, landers, Command Zers.
The Command Zers.
Yeah.
The Command Z.
All right. Love you. Bye. Love you. Bye. Love you. Bye.
The Command Z Show is created by Made by Things. And if you have a question you would like us to discuss, you can send a message at CMD-Z.show. And if you like what you hear, leave a review. We'll see you next week with a brand new show.